Hello, I'm going to be showing you how to make a basic game in GameMaker Studio, just a basic top-down shooter. So we're going to be starting out by making the player sprite. Right-click, create, sprite. We're going to call that SPR_wall or player or whatever we're making. Right now we're making the wall, so go to Edit, New, and we're going to create the sprite for the wall. Sprite's essentially an image. Notice that, I'm trying to keep this tutorial relatively short, so I apologize for rushing for new developers or, noobs. I'm going to give you guys the benefit of the doubt so you can figure it out. Oh, that rhymed. So, SPR is just a little bit of a label beforehand, because in computer programming, when we name something, we want it to be exactly what it is. There can be conflicting names, like when you name an object, a sound, and the sprite, the exact same thing. We want to be able to encode, tell exactly what is. So we're going to be going into objects right now. This is a little bit more relevant here. So go to objects, right click, create object, name it obj_player. So as you can see here, we named the sprite and the object just player, and what happens is you get an error like that. In programming, we actually need to be able to differentiate between objects, scripts, sounds, whatever the resource may be. Otherwise, within the code, everything gets jumbled, and the computer has no idea what we're talking about, because everything needs its individual ID. There's a few ways people do this. You can do obj_player, O_player, O_player. Some people capitalize letters. I personally prefer obj_player because it's a little bit more decisive to have obj. A good example of this would be sound versus sprite. If we just do S_player or S_player for sound sprite, that first initial doesn't mean a whole lot because we have both sound and sprite, so now the computer doesn't know what we're talking about. It's important to keep in mind that not all cases will have names that conflict, but it's an important practice right now to get into actually naming and abbreviating your object, sprites, whatever, resource correctly. It's a common practice in professional projects, so just keep that in mind. I'm just fixing the names right now because I fucked it up for the example. Now that we have our sprites set up, though, we can go on to objects. Hold on, I'm actually going to make a cursor sprite. You can do whatever. I'm just going to show you the editor a little bit. I'm making this to show you the origin and how we need to center some sprites and some examples, but we probably won't get into this until the next tutorial. Okay, so we centered that. We're just going to put the origin right in the middle, whereas it's usually at 0, 0. And what that does is just puts our central point where everything works from right in the middle. You'll find that making the origin in a different place is very useful for rotating things, because rotation works around that point, and eventually we'll get into guns and stuff, so that will be important. Okay, go to obj_player, and we already named it. I'm going to show you a little bit of a more professional way to do this. So within GameMaker, they have drag and drop, and that's like code blocks. They're coding little pieces that snap together and shit. But given that you're not a kid, I'll give you a little bit more credit. If you are a kid, don't watch this. I'm sorry. So let's add a create event. And an event is something that triggers when you specify. So the create event triggers upon creation, step event, every step of the game. We'll go into that in a bit. So upon the creation of this instance / object, we should execute some code. So let's drag in a code block. So go to Control, Code, and drag in a code block. This window just popped up, and this is the space that we get to code in. So we're going to label this by putting 3 forward slashes, and that's a title. We're going to call this init for initiate, and we're going to put some variables in here. So we're going to start out with the variable speed, or SPD, and this is just a variable, so it can be anything you want. We're going to set that equal to 4 and terminate it. So put a semicolon at the end. It's not necessary, but it's definitely applicable to different programming languages, so it becomes practical after a certain point. So what SPD is literally whatever you want it to be. You could call it anything. You could call it Fart Knocker or Lego 69, any dumb fucking name. It doesn't matter. It could be a random combination of keys, but it's a variable just like X or Y within standard algebra. The only difference is it can be a word. I just commented my code, so just do 2 forward slashes, and I called it speed of the player. That kind of looks dumb though, so we're just going to go ahead and make a section called movement, and it's good to section off areas like this. And max underscore speed for the maximum speed, and we'll add some guns later, so we'll make a section for that. But for now, we should be done with the create event, and this is just initializing all of our variables, so setting it up beforehand so we can use it later on in the code. And that's important because otherwise it won't know what you're talking about. Okay, add an event, step event, and what the step event does is it runs every single tick of the game, every step of the game, every frame of the game, every moment that the game updates. This is when this code runs. And you'll notice with other events they operate the same. So we're going to go to control, code, and drag in a code block. Don't use that green arrowed thing. It's entirely different. You don't want that. So we're going to make a section for controls. This is where we're going to be introducing logic. So if, then, if will be represented by the word if, and then will be represented by curly brackets. You'll see that in a bit. So if keyboard underscore check, and this is where we're going to be checking if our button is being pressed. There's also keyboard underscore check pressed, and that's when we actually press the key rather than holding it. So if we hold it, it's going to consistently be true or 1 or on or whatever. This is with standard keyboard underscore check, obviously. Okay, so ORD, O-R-D, and then 2 parentheses. And within there, we're going to do a string. A string is basically not a number. So like 1, 2, 3, that's not a string, that's a real number. So for example, if we put 2 quotation marks around the word 1, or any word for that matter, 1, 2, 3, then that becomes text rather than actual numbers. We can use that as text. It's a string. Now the difference with ORD is that it only takes a single character string because it's going to be returning a button on your keyboard rather than an actual piece of text. So we're just going to go with W for up, WASD, standard order. However, there's some other keys like shift that don't use ORD. I'll show you to use that later. We're going to put 2 curly brackets here now, and that's the then statement in this case. And the curly brackets are located right next to P and right below plus and minus. So on the right hand side of P is the left curly bracket, and make sure you're pressing shift. For our then statement, we're going to want to make an enclosed area with 2 curly brackets. And for the sake of code cleanliness, we're going to want to press tab in here, and that's just going to separate things out so it's easily readable. You'll see later on, once we start doing a lot of these curly brackets, that this will become incredibly important because it really makes it readable. Now we're going to do y minus equals SPD, which again stands for speed. And I'm going to explain that in a little bit. So far what we're doing is we're checking if we are consistently holding down W, and if we are, we're going to subtract our y coordinate by our speed. So the if then statement is just going to execute the code that's in that area. So I should explain this. As you know, on a standard graph, y is up and down, right, and x is left and right. Right? So when we press W, we want to go up the screen, right? So it might be a little bit curious why we're subtracting from the Y coordinates. See, the thing about GM, or computer programs in general outside of that, is that we like to start in the 4th coordinate plane, and that's because we get to start in the top left corner. So Y actually, as you increase it, is going farther down the grid. If you come from a purely academic background, you might find this to be a little bit confusing, but it is incredibly useful in computer science to have it start in that top left corner because generally we read left to right. So when programming, we're going to have to remember that Y increases as it goes down the screen. If you look at the numbers at the bottom, actually, it will tell my mouse position, and as I go down the screen, that increases, just like I said. And if we go up, then it decreases. As you can see at the top here, it's actually 0. So now if we go down, you'll see that the number increases. X is the same as any regular grid though. As we go right, the number increases. As we go left, the number decreases. We can go to the negatives. It works exactly the same. We're essentially in the 4th coordinate plane, but the negatives are now a positive, and positive is now a negative. So now we're going to label this up movement. So keyboard underscore check, and then do 2 parentheses. And this is a function, so anything within here will go through this in and out box, and we'll get a value back. In this case, that's either 0 or 1. So within computers, we use binary, which is consisting of 0 and 1. This is called Boolean, which is true or false. Yeah, so it's going to return false or true. And If it is true, then we're going to move to the left, because that's what A does. So if it is true, we're actually going to move, but if it's false, then we're going to do nothing. Same thing goes for down here. ORed, then 2 parentheses, and within those parentheses, quotation marks, and then within those quotation marks, A. So it's going to check if we're pressing A. And this is going to be movement left. So we're going to do 2 curly brackets, and within here, we're going to be changing the X coordinate now. Make sure to label this section left movement. And if you couldn't tell, we're actually doing WASD movement. So since we're going left, we're going to change the X coordinate, and the X coordinate increases as we go to the right. So we're actually going to be subtracting from this again. So minus equal to speed, SPD, and then terminate the statement. So put a semicolon at the end of it. If you look at the WASD setup, then you can see that A is to the left, D is to the right, S is down, and W is up. And I guess you could look at those to tell which direction you want to go. Yeah, so let's just subtract the speed, because we're going left and shit. E, alright. We're going to copy and paste this, and we're going to repeat the exact same thing for S and D. And we could do the exact same thing with the arrow keys, and in the next tutorial I'll show you how to do that. Hopefully I can put in a lot more to the next tutorial now that I got the basics down in this one. So we copy and pasted it. Now make sure to label left movement and down movement, and we're going to change the pluses, or minuses to pluses. And what this is going to do is move it into the opposite direction. And we're also going to change the A and W to S and D. And now we should have full WASD. I think I explained this in great enough depth before, but as previously stated, the Y coordinate moves down as you increase. And this should be good for a go. So press check mark, go to the room, the main room, or create a room if you don't already have one. And we're gonna click the objects tab, and in there there's gonna be a big empty kind of like box area. Click there, choose the player, place him in the room. I'll smack him in the middle. Check mark on the room. And now once we get to the regular screen, press the big green button at the top, or you can press F5. And this should take a little bit to compile. Compiling, and he moves. A. Yep. And exit. So next time I'm going to be just covering a little bit more on some of the basics. Save the game again. Alright, see you next time.